Welcome back to Santa Barbara Entrepreneur. My name is Summers McKay. For those of you that I have not yet met, it is a pleasure. I'd love to see our growing group. Thanks to Newspheric and First Click for hosting us and letting us put on this event. It continues to be a great place for us to really have a high-minded conversation about conscious entrepreneurship. So we as is really important, I think, in any startup community. We see ourselves as collaborators, not competitors, which is why when I sat with First Click and said, hey, we have this other great agency, Oniracom, let's bring them together because we have complementary services. You guys can work really well together. So we also, Charlene Sansoni has been part of Santa Barbara Entrepreneur since its inception and has been a very good friend of mine. So thank you for being here. One totally selfish plug. Next week on Lovegasm, we are interviewing Lisa Amador of Santa Barbara Matchmaking. So everyone tune in, subscribe to Lovegasm, hosted by yours truly. So, and Lisa, is Lisa still here or did she leave?
Where can we find
Lisa,
that?
Wave! She's the one.
Summers, where can we find that?
Lovegasm, you can get, if you subscribe to it on iTunes or Stitcher, it's a podcast. It's also on Podcast Addict or any of the podcast services. So you can also find it on lovesummers.com. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Jacob Tell, the CEO and founder of Oniracom. I had the pleasure of learning about him when I was just about to graduate from college, and my second cousin had this music career that was launching, and the internet was very new. And my second cousin happened to go to Santa Barbara. This is my mom's cousin's son. And all of a sudden, there were these email things and this website thing. Well, he's kind of a Santa Barbara local. His name is Jack Johnson. You might have heard of him. I didn't tell you that beforehand, but he was my second cousin. But, what's that?
We have that in common.
We do have that in common, but he really developed an online platform, and that's really when I was starting to get interested in digital media. Simultaneously, Jacob, on the other side of the world, down here from Berkeley to Santa Barbara, was developing the online platform. And that really was one of the inception points for a business that has now had its 15th year.
We're about to, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a startup, it's a long-standing business that's been through many iterations, and it's really a pleasure to have you to come speak to us about from the college dorm room to the condo to the business that you have today. So
Thank
welcome.
You. Hey guys. I like the coffee, hanging out outside, this is nice. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story, kind of the winding path, and then a little bit about where we're going, and then we'll open it up to a few questions. So basically, thank you again, Summers. We started in 2001 here in Santa Barbara. I was actually at UC Santa Barbara doing film studies, and my co-founder was at UCLA running through electrical engineering and computer science. So we had a pretty complementary left-right brain going, although I convinced him to come here because I didn't want to go to LA. So we started the business while we were finishing up school, which was completely insane and naive and awesome all at the same time. And at the time we didn't really know exactly what it meant to run a business. We didn't get MBAs or do any of that. So we started up as a web development shop, mostly working with film through the film studies program at UCSB, and then some musicians. Jack Johnson was one of the early musicians who happened to be in Santa Barbara and coming out with his first album in 2001. So we early on had to figure out, e-commerce, and at this time it was a very different landscape. The sites we were building were like Flash-based, and we had discussion forums, and e-commerce was very early, and credit card processing was very difficult, and logistics and fulfillment of physical product was not what it is today. We didn't have drones dropping off packages. So It was the wild, wild west, and especially when you add in the music industry component, because you had all these other players involved, from labels to managers, on down to the artist. So it was a big learning experience, and we found our niche. You know, once we started working with Jack and had some successes there, it was pretty easy to get involved with his record label, which was Universal Music Group. So they didn't quite have like the digital agency components in-house at that time, and they still actually had budgets back then, before the labels went through their transformation in the 2000s. So we were able to, you know, kind of spiral in the music industry, working with them, and then Warner and Sony and EMI and all the major labels and other artists and management groups. So we got our niche, which was really important early on. Really, design and development was it. We didn't call ourselves a marketing agency. In fact, it took us a few years to figure out that putting things on the internet for people to see was considered marketing. We honestly did not go into it thinking marketing at all. It was web, it was technology, and that's where our passion was. That's what we did. We then had a really cool opportunity, because we were doing e-commerce and merchandising online. I got invited to tour the world with Jack Johnson, doing merchandise all over the globe. So that was 2003 to 2006, somewhere in there, and that huge schooling. I mean, from logistics to you know, international trade, to working with labels and internationally. It was a lot of hard work. It was, you know, a lot of sleepless nights. But we were able to take what we learned there and then come back and expand into event production and a lot of other areas locally. So we've actually put on some fun events in town here, at the Arlington and other places afterwards, and really positioned ourselves more as a marketing company at that time. During that whole transition, this whole thing called social media came about. And I mean, when we started, there was no tablets, smartphones, YouTube. Wi-Fi was barely usable. We had, you know, big brick laptops with Ethernet cables running across the room in our home offices. So this whole social media revolution came about. I mean, we were like one of the first artists on MySpace. We had like the Jack Johnson at myspace.com email address to log in. It was pretty cool. We'd go down to their headquarters and actually meet all the exec teams and with the labels and stuff. And it was a fun time before they went bust. And at that time, we decided that we wanted to add these services on. So we still remained very much a technology company, but we added on social media and marketing and strategy services around that design and development core that we had those first few years. We continued organically growing a bit. We went from maybe like 4 people to half a dozen to 8. And then eventually we kind of burst at the seams where we were staying in this duplex down in Montecito. And so we had to get a real office space.
By bursting at the seams, you painted a little more of a rich picture when we talked the first time.
What did I omit?
Well, you kind of got called out by your landlord.
We did get called out by our landlord, yes. Good detail. So we had lots of cars parked in a residential area from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and she wondered why the cars disappeared at 6 p.m. every day and why they reappeared every morning at 9 a.m. So we sort of were forced out of that place, which was good timing. We needed a bigger space anyway. So that's part of the entrepreneur's dream, is the opportunities. You know, one door closes, another door opens. We were lucky enough that this happened during the recession, actually, because the commercial real estate prices were rock bottom, and it worked in our favor. We got a really cool space on Haley. We're still there. You guys come down and check it out. Charlene will greet you when you come in. She's our awesome project manager, if you didn't know. At that time, really, it was solidifying our team, services, and figuring out you know, is the music space where we're going to stay or not, because it was going through a major transformation. Labels were bringing in all the agency services in-house. They were slashing their marketing budgets, and it was kind of a big transition point. So when we moved kind of all at once, we grew our staff a bit. We were now up to maybe 12 to 14 head count. We had interns going as well, some contractors, and we were also adding on video production services because we were doing. Yes, Melissa has done video and photo services with us during that time. and that was probably about 2010. And we also, at that time, kind of looked around Santa Barbara and went, there's a lot of really cool opportunities here. The music space is changing. We are now doing branding, we're now doing social media, we're now doing strategy. Let's apply what we've learned in the music space to other brands. So we started working locally with different brands, from shoe companies, a couple of the smaller Deckers brands, to SONOS, to Santa Barbara Bowl, and then because of the Jack Johnson ethos, we've always worked with nonprofits. Santa Barbara having a few nonprofits was also some low-hanging fruit for us. So we've also been working with Heal the Ocean and the Food Bank and the Braille Institute and a few other pretty awesome groups here. So it was a bit of diversification during our growth phase, but it was also a good challenge, and all people really appreciated taking what we learned in the music space and applying it to their brands.
When you guys were going through that pivot from, okay, we understand the music business is changing, what happened internally at your company and with your stakeholders? How was that conversation received? And I mean, was it all kumbaya and happy, or was there stress, or what kind of happened during that change?
It was a bit stressful because a lot of the retainers that we had with the labels were diminishing, were vanishing, and so we had to transition, and figure out other revenue sources. But once we decided, we had this strategy of looking locally and working with businesses that we aligned with, whether they were on the nonprofit side or on the for-profit side, it was pretty much a straight line from that point. Yeah. So last 5 years or so has been, down on Haley Street, working in the Santa Barbara community, and expanding out our team, and we've got a full-service marketing agency now. The other thing that I want to talk a little bit about is the fact that being a service agency, you can scale so much. How many heads can you add, how many projects can you take on, but it's still project-based work. So we, through kind of accident and kind of clients asking for different technology solutions, have developed a platform. They've been incubating our own technology IP within our agency, and we're now to the point where we're taking it to some pretty interesting groups, including like the Staples Center and the Santa Barbara Bowl, and some groups in Las Vegas. It's called Storywall, and we can talk about that after. That's not why I'm here, but it's an interesting point because we've looked a lot at other companies that have done this. 37 Signals is a good example. They started as a marketing agency and then incubated Basecamp and Highrise and other applications within their agency, and diversified from being a service company to being a product company. So that's an interesting path that we're on, and we're kind of seeing what's going to happen. Our intention is to take this to market, scale it up, and have Oniracom support customization of the platform, and have the platform bring clients into Oniracom. So we see a good symbiosis between the two. So that's sort of where I've come from, where we are now, where we're going into the future. I know there's one more section we're supposed to review. I'll defer.
You were going to just kind of do some startup advice.
Startup advice?
Startup storytelling advice.
Okay. Yes, life is not a straight line. Startup advice. I mean, cliche advice is obviously follow your dreams. Our slogan is Solutions for Dreamers. We take it very seriously. Oniracom literally means communicating dreams. It's based on a Greek term, oniric, which is pertaining to the dreamlike space or time. And we've really engaged entrepreneurs with vision, with dreams, well. I think that when we have something in alignment, magic can occur. So I would say that make sure that you are in alignment with what it is that you're doing, that you're passionate with what you're doing, and that you continue to fail fast and learn and make mistakes and just keep plugging along. It's all about learning and growing and not having the answers.
Thank you. So we'll open it up to Q&A. I'll start. When a startup is identifying their brand, how can their digital brand either help them discover what their brand? Can they use digital media to kind of discover their brand, or should they have a clear picture before they go with their digital marketing platforms?
It's a good question. We like to have a lot of those items defined prior to launching a campaign. So we'll do a lot of in-person discovery work where we go over the voice, we look at the competitive landscape, we talk about, goals and objectives and what their vision is for moving forward. It's good to have at least a roadmap on paper that everybody's going to agree with before the campaign starts, because there's going to be pivot points and changes, and it's nice to have a reference point to go back to. But I think absolutely you want to learn from your customers, you want to learn from your online interactions, be it transactional or otherwise, social media related, and that can either reinforce your brand and your mission, or you can use that to make adjustments if needed.
I have a question. I've noticed with most startups, I have a few behind me, that the main thing, the chasm is between having a dream and actually getting your first paying customer. How did you bridge that chasm? How did you get your first paying customer?
Well, how we got our first paying customers was networking and through the communities that we invested time and energy into. Like, for example, our first clients were actually in the film space, and because I studied film at UC Santa Barbara, there was a lot of time and energy put into that community, into that network, and I used the resources that I had on campus and through different university contacts to do that. But I would say that for students, a lot of times I speak with that maybe want to get into branding or want to get into photography or want to get into something, I tell them, do that for yourself or do it for free for another client. Put it online, make a portfolio, whatever it is you do. If you want to build websites, build a website, put it online. You've got to have something to show rather than just having an idea or having a dream.
Did they know that they were your first customer?
I honestly don't recall. They probably did. But yeah, that's a good question.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Like, do you fake it till you make it? And do you put it out there and say, look at all my customers? And, it's like on Lovegasm, our first advertising client is my best friend's company. So she paid me $5 and we're fine, But do you kind of fake it till you make it?
We did not have a large portfolio. I do know that. So it could be a challenge to, they say, hey, we'd like to see some work, and you don't have too much to show for. But a lot of that is trust building, a lot of that is relationship building. So you have to invest in those relationships, and it's a leap of faith on both sides.
Jacob, I've got a question about just the changing landscape of the internet and web development. Since, for me, the mid-90s, for you, 2001, pretty much the same time.
Yeah.
I remember the first website I got involved with, the budget was about $500,000. And it wasn't really that big a deal. Today we could build it in about 3 days.
Yep.
And
it's commoditized. Absolutely.
Well, how do you deal with that? So First Click that operates here does similar stuff. We come up against it a lot. Brand building, storytelling versus a template-based website that's 1/10 of the cost. So how does a company like yours maintain its integrity and still be competitive and provide a value proposition while
It's
growing?
a great question. Yeah, it's, my nephew can build me a site in 3 days for $100. I'm like, cool, go have him do it. That's great. Like, build the site for $100, and we'll talk after you're, wherever you land with that. A lot of it is saying no to the wrong types of clients. We really had to think about what is our ideal client, and what do they look like, what is their value set, do they align with ours? A lot of it is alignment. But even still, if we want to work with someone, maybe their budgets aren't quite there on the website. We have focused and emphasized a lot on the strategy side to become really high value partners and consultants for them. And we've made a conscious shift in our language and in our sales and marketing materials to move away from a vendor relationship, being just a marketing vendor, to being a long-term partner. So we will often invest some kind of resource up front for a longer term or contract with a client. And hope to diversify services, so it's not just maybe the website, but we're also doing some video production, we're doing some storytelling, maybe some copywriting, some PR work, that kind of thing. And that's pretty much how we've shifted. But I agree, the web has turned into it's commoditized space for sure. I love Squarespace, but now we're like screw the high-powered CMSs, will just pop up a Squarespace, and it's typically enough. And you know, if I would have told myself that 5 years ago, I would have been shaking my head, but that's where it is now. Yeah.
I think there was a question in the back there. Yeah. What's the mistake you see a lot of companies make with their storytelling? Or I'm sure there are lots of them, but what are common mistakes you might see?
Too many buzzwords.
Buzzwords.
Yeah, just be human and talk. And if you're up here talking, like, speak that. I think voice is a big challenge a lot of times. I think people love like the Squatty Potty commercial because it's so human and it's just funny and it's relatable and authentic. Maybe that's a little too extreme, but if you haven't seen it, please Google it.
Yeah.
The Squatty Potty ice cream commercial.
I have not seen it.
So
we'll post that on the page.
Yeah, I think people can lighten up in their voice and their tone and be a little bit more approachable and human centric. I think buzzwords can be the downfall of a lot of businesses. Like, how many value propositions have you said where it's our mission is it's just the same 3 sentences no matter what.
You had mentioned when we first talked that trying to do everything all at once is often a risk, and that sometimes identifying a particular methodology and really honing that in is a good strategy. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, so we treat our workflow as a service agency. We treat our workflow as our product, because we are able to repeat practices and scale. And this is something that Charlene and I work on quite often, is like, if we're going to do something once, let's make sure that we can learn from that and make adjustments and do it again. I think it's really important to have an evolving, living, breathing workflow or process that, you know, your staff can tell you pain points, you can make adjustments, or you can notice when clients aren't quite getting something and maybe you're not being clear in the process or in the workflow. So I think that's very important to focus on.
Do you use any particular tool to support that workflow?
We do. We use a project management system called Asana, asana.com. It's free for small teams and it's fantastic. It's very flexible, drag and drop, and it's worked out really well for us.
At Charlene's recommendation, I have been fooling around with Asana for my company.
Good.
It's been super helpful.
It's a wonderful
just even
tool.
organizing my own, knowing what I'm asking my team to do.
Yep.
And keeping track.
We left Basecamp probably 5 years ago for Asana, and it's been incredible. It was created by one of the Facebook co-founders, and they made it for mostly software development teams, but it could apply to any. One of my business partners uses it to like make lists of home improvements with his wife, and they delegate to each other.
It's a honey-do list. That's
like,
fantastic.
yeah, the honey-do list. Yeah, go to Home Depot and pick up lumber and that kind of stuff. It works. So.
We have time for a couple more questions. Does anybody else have any? Yes.
You were just getting started 15 years ago. What was your biggest whoops?
Getting started? No. That's a good question. I mean, there's so many of them. I don't know what the biggest one was. We didn't go to business school. Like I said, we didn't really have a business plan. We didn't really have a marketing plan. I mean, we had a light business plan, but not something that we really checked in with frequently. So maybe we could have been more efficient in our trajectory had we been, 2020 hindsight, had we been checking in on that original plan more
You
frequently.
kind of basically flew by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, it was project by project, client to client, and it was an exciting time too. And we were in entertainment, so a lot of it was like, oh, cool, we get to hang out with rock stars and be backstage, and that was enough to.
Got hit on the off.
It was the nature of the time too,
Yeah.
right?
When you're
2000
21 years
versus
old,
2016.
it's pretty fun.
What was the best part about traveling around the world? Best country, best concert?
Probably Australia, New Zealand. That tour was pretty amazing down there. But lots of flying. They don't have buses like tour buses like Europe and North America do. So you have to literally fly from show to show. So that's exhausting. But the people are incredible. The landscapes are incredible.
So there's going to be an Oniracom Australia office. Is probably in the
We
future.
have our southern star folks down there. We can ramp them up when they're ready.